Top 1 Baalbek Megalithic Stones. In the Bikayoa Valley of Lebanon, buried beneath centuries of Roman construction and Ottoman-era debris, lies something that should not exist. The foundation stones of Baalbek are not remarkable because of their age. They are remarkable because no civilization on Earth, ancient or modern, has ever adequately explained how they got there. These are not ordinary building blocks. The largest single stone at Baalbek, known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, weighs an estimated 1,000 tons. Nearby, a second stone weighs approximately 1,200 tons. And in 2014, a third stone was uncovered, still partially buried in the quarry, estimated at 1,650 tons. That is the weight of 3 fully loaded Boeing 747 aircraft stacked together. None of these stones have ever been moved. They remain exactly where they were cut, as if whatever was moving them simply stopped one day and never returned. The quarry itself sits roughly 1 kilometer from the temple complex, which means that whoever cut these stones intended to transport them uphill across uneven terrain and then lift them into position alongside other megalithic blocks already forming the platform. The precision of that platform, known as the Grand Terrace, is what silences engineers even today. The stones fit together without mortar, with tolerances so tight that a razor blade cannot be inserted between them. Modern laser surveys have confirmed alignment accuracies that would challenge present-day construction equipment. The Romans, who built extensively on top of this platform, never claimed credit for the foundation. Their own historical records treat the existing structure as something they inherited, not something they built. The official archaeological position is that Phoenician or early Bronze Age laborers constructed the platform using rope, manpower, and wooden sledges. Experimental archaeologists have attempted to demonstrate this theory. Their largest successful move involved a stone weighing approximately 1.5 tons. The gap between 1.5 tons and 1,650 tons is not a matter of scaling up the workforce. At a certain mass, ropes snap, wood splinters, and the ground itself becomes a structural problem. No engineer has produced a credible model showing how these stones could have been moved with ancient technology. What makes Baalbek uniquely disturbing is not just the weight, it is the absence of evidence. No ramps have been found, no construction debris, no tool marks consistent with the cutting methods of any known ancient civilization, no recorded mythology from the region that explains the building process. The Phoenician records are silent. The earliest written references to Baalbek describe it as already ancient. Roman engineers, among the most sophisticated builders of the classical world, looked at this foundation and built on top of it without question, as if questioning it was never an option they considered. Something cut those stones with purpose and precision. Something intended to move them. Whatever that something was, it has been quietly written out of every official archaeological report filed since. Top 2 White Sands Footprints. In the desert of New Mexico, preserved beneath layers of ancient sediment, a set of human footprints was discovered that immediately complicated everything archaeologists believed they knew about when people first arrived in North America. These were not controversial because of their location. They were controversial because of their age. In 2021, a team of researchers from the United States Geological Survey published findings in the journal Science confirming that fossilized human footprints found at White Sands National Park dated to between 21,000 and 23,000 years ago. That single date range did not just challenge the established timeline, it shattered it. The accepted model of human migration into the Americas, known as the Clovis First Theory, had dominated academic archaeology for decades. According to that model, humans crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia into Alaska approximately 13,000 years ago and gradually moved southward. The White Sands footprints place human beings in the interior of North America roughly 10,000 years before that migration was supposed to have even begun. At the time these people were walking across what is now New Mexico, the Bering Land Bridge was either submerged or blocked by glacial ice sheets. The standard migration route was physically impassable. These people should not have been there, and yet their footprints are pressed into the earth with unmistakable clarity. The dating methodology used was rigorous and independently verified. Researchers dated seeds from an aquatic plant called Ruppia serosa found embedded within the footprint layers. Multiple rounds of radiocarbon dating returned consistent results. The USGS does not publish findings in peer-reviewed journals without extensive internal verification. These were not amateur measurements taken in the field. They were laboratory results confirmed across multiple institutions. The scientific community largely accepted the dates, while simultaneously struggling to explain what they meant. What the footprints themselves reveal is equally unsettling. The tracks include those of adults, children, and adolescents moving together. Some tracks show individuals carrying things. Others show a mammoth walking through the same area, with human prints overlapping the animal tracks, suggesting active proximity. These were not isolated wanderers. This was a group of people living in, moving through, and interacting with a landscape that official history insists they could not have reached yet. The behavioral complexity preserved in those prints reflects a population that had already been established long enough to develop social structure and intergenerational movement patterns. No tools, no campsites, and no skeletal remains have yet been recovered from the immediate site to further characterize who these people were or where they originated. That absence is not unusual in archaeological terms, but it ensures that the central question remains open. If humans were present in New Mexico 23,000 years ago, they arrived by a route that has never been identified, from a point of origin that has never been confirmed, using a migration path that current models cannot account for. The footprints are real. The explanation is not. Top 3. Pumapunku. On the wind-swept Bolivian Altiplano, at an elevation of nearly 12,800 ft above sea level, the ruins of Pumapunku sit in a state of deliberate destruction. The site is not merely old. It is architecturally impossible by every standard that conventional archaeology applies to pre-Columbian civilizations. The stones here were not stacked or piled. They were machined. That word is not used loosely or for dramatic effect. Engineers, metallurgists, and material scientists who have physically examined the blocks at Pumapunku have used that precise terminology in their assessments, because no other word accurately describes what they found. The blocks at Pumapunku are composed primarily of red sandstone and andesite. The andesite is particularly significant. It is one of the hardest stones on Earth, ranking just below granite on the Mohs hardness scale. Cutting andesite with bronze or stone tools, which is what the Tiwanaku civilization supposedly possessed, produces rough, uneven surfaces. The surfaces at Pumapunku are not rough. They are flat to tolerances measured in millimeters. The edges are sharp and consistent. Interior angles are precise. Identical H-shaped blocks have been found across the site, each one a near-perfect copy of the others, with internal grooves and channels that align with geometric accuracy. Producing a single block like this with modern diamond-tipped cutting equipment would be considered skilled work. Producing dozens of identical copies at altitude without metal tools strains the boundaries of rational explanation. The official archaeological position assigns Pumapunku to the Tiwanaku culture, dating construction to approximately 500 to 600 AD. But the dating of the site has itself been contested. Arthur Posnanski, a prominent archaeologist who spent decades studying Tiwanaku, used archaeoastronomical analysis to argue that portions of the complex dated to approximately 15,000 BC. His methodology was disputed by mainstream scholars, but his physical measurements of the site have never been successfully refuted. The astronomical alignments he documented are real and mathematically verifiable. Only the conclusions drawn from them remain debated. What no one disputes is the transportation problem. The largest stones at Pumapunku weigh between 130 and 180 tons. The andesite used in the precision-cut blocks was quarried from a site approximately 90 kilometers away across Lake Titicaca. The red sandstone originated from a quarry 10 kilometers distant. Neither source is accessible by flat terrain. Moving these materials to an elevation of nearly 13,000 ft without wheeled vehicles, without draft animals capable of handling such loads, and without any recorded construction methodology, represents a logistical challenge that modern civil engineers have declined to model because the variables required make the exercise implausible. The Tiwanaku left no written records. Their oral traditions do not describe building Pumapunku. They describe inheriting it. Whatever civilization precision-cut those andesite blocks, worked at altitude, solved a transportation problem that defies current engineering models, and then disappeared without leaving a single tool behind. Top 4. Great Pyramid of Cholula. In the Mexican state of Puebla, disguised beneath centuries of soil and vegetation, sits the largest pyramid on Earth by volume. Not the tallest, not the most famous, but by sheer mass and internal cubic measurement. Nothing built by human hands anywhere on the planet exceeds it. The Great Pyramid of Cholula, known in the indigenous Nahuatl language as Tlachihualtepetl, meaning artificial mountain, contains an estimated 4.45 million cubic meters of material. The Great Pyramid of Giza, by comparison, contains approximately 2.5 million cubic meters. Cholula is nearly twice the size, and for centuries the entire structure was mistaken for a natural hill. A Spanish colonial church was built on top of it in 1594, and it stands there still, which means one of the most significant architectural achievements in human history spent hundreds of years being used as a foundation without anyone realizing what was underneath. The pyramid was not built in a single phase. Archaeological excavation has revealed at least 4 distinct construction stages, each one built over the previous, like a series of nested structures expanding outward and upward over time. The earliest construction phase has been dated to the 3rd century BC. The most recent major phase extended into approximately the 9th century AD. That means active construction and expansion continued across a span of roughly 1,000 years, involving multiple cultures and possibly multiple civilizations, who each recognized the site as significant enough to build upon rather than abandon. No single culture has been definitively credited with the original construction. The earliest builders remain unidentified. What makes Cholula archaeologically destabilizing is not just its size. It is the internal tunnel system. Researchers and archaeologists have excavated approximately 8 kilometers of tunnels running through the interior of the pyramid. What those tunnels have revealed is a construction methodology of extraordinary sophistication. Interior chambers show evidence of precise geometric planning. Load-bearing walls are positioned to distribute the enormous weight of successive construction phases without structural failure. The pyramid has stood for over 2,000 years without significant collapse, which means whoever engineered the original foundation understood the mechanical principles of mass distribution at a scale that was not supposed to exist in pre-Columbian Mesoamerican civilization. The Spanish deliberately built their church on the summit, not out of ignorance, but as a calculated act of religious and cultural erasure. Colonial records confirm that indigenous populations considered the site sacred and continued rituals there, even after conquest. The church was a statement of dominance over whatever spiritual authority the pyramid represented. That decision inadvertently preserved the structure by discouraging excavation for centuries. Official Mexican archaeology has investigated only a fraction of the total site. Large sections of the pyramid remain completely unexcavated. What lies in the deeper interior construction phases, beneath the earliest identified layers, has not been examined. The structure that holds a Catholic church on its crown and hides 8 kilometers of tunnels in its core has not finished revealing what it contains. Top 5. Kalambo Falls Wooden Structure. On the banks of the Kalambo River, near the border of Zambia and Tanzania, at the edge of one of Africa's most spectacular waterfalls, archaeologists uncovered something in 2023 that forced an immediate and uncomfortable reassessment of human cognitive evolution. What they found was wood, specifically 2 interlocking logs deliberately shaped and joined together using a notch construction technique preserved in the waterlogged sediment of the riverbank. The discovery itself sounds unremarkable until the dating results came back. The wooden structure was found to be at least 426,000 years old. That figure is not a misprint. Nearly 500,000 years ago, a human ancestor at Kalambo Falls cut, shaped, and joined 2 pieces of wood together to create a stable platform or raised structure of some kind. This predates the existence of Homo sapiens entirely. The dating was conducted using 2 independent methods. Researchers applied luminescence dating techniques to the sediment surrounding the wood, measuring how long the mineral grains had been buried without exposure to light. Both methods returned consistent results confirming the age. The findings were published in the journal Nature in September 2023 by a team from the University of Liverpool and associated institutions. The peer review process for a claim of this magnitude was exhaustive. the dates held. What did not hold was the existing model of early human behavior that archaeologists had built their consensus around for decades. The prevailing understanding of pre-modern human ancestors held that they were exclusively nomadic. The cognitive framework required to construct a permanent or semi-permanent structure, to look at a landscape and decide to modify it for habitation, rather than simply moving through it, was considered a uniquely modern human development. The Colombo structure overturns that assumption entirely. The hominid responsible, most likely Homo heidelbergensis, based on the time frame, demonstrated intentional planning, knowledge of wood joining techniques, and the foresight to create something designed to last beyond immediate use. These are not the behavioral markers of a creature operating purely on instinct. These are the behavioral markers of an architect. The implications extend beyond a single construction. If a hominid species was building structured platforms nearly 500,000 years ago, the question is no longer whether pre-modern humans were capable of complex behavior. The question becomes how much complex behavior has been lost, buried, or simply not yet found. The archaeological record of wooden structures is inherently incomplete because wood decays. What survived at Colombo Falls survived because of exceptional waterlogged preservation conditions that are extraordinarily rare. Every site that lacked those conditions has left no trace. The Colombo structure is almost certainly not an isolated incident. It is a surviving example of a behavioral pattern that was likely widespread and is now almost entirely invisible to modern archaeology. The timeline of human cognitive development did not just shift with this discovery. It collapsed backward by hundreds of thousands of years, and no revised model has yet been agreed upon to replace what was lost. Top 6 Jebel Irhoud fossils. In the foothills of the Atlas Mountains in Morocco, inside a cave system that had previously been dismissed as a minor prehistoric site, workers extracting barite ore in the 1960s accidentally broke through into a chamber containing human bones. The fossils were examined, cataloged, and initially assigned a date of approximately 40,000 years ago. That estimate placed them comfortably within the accepted range of early modern human remains found across Africa and Europe, and for decades the Jebel Irhoud specimens sat in storage, unremarkable and largely unstudied. Then researchers returned to the site with modern dating technology. The results did not refine the original estimate, they destroyed it. The Jebel Irhoud fossils were not 40,000 years old. They were 315,000 years old, with a margin of error placing the lower bound at approximately 280,000 years. The findings were published in Nature in June 2017 and immediately restructured the entire scientific understanding of when and where Homo sapiens first appeared. The significance of that date cannot be overstated. Prior to Jebel Irhoud, the oldest confirmed Homo sapiens fossils came from the Omo Kibish site in Ethiopia, dated to approximately 195,000 years ago. The scientific consensus held that modern humans emerged in East Africa around 200,000 years ago and gradually spread across the continent and beyond. Jebel Irhoud pushed that origin point back by more than 100,000 years and moved it geographically from East Africa to North Africa, which are not minor adjustments. They are foundational revisions to the narrative of human origins that had been taught, published, and defended in academic institutions for generations. The fossils themselves present an anatomically complex picture. The facial structure of the Jebel Irhoud specimens is strikingly modern. The brow ridge, cheekbones, and dental morphology closely resemble those of present-day humans. However, the brain case, the posterior portion of the skull that houses the brain, is elongated and more archaic in shape compared to modern humans. This combination suggests that the face of Homo sapiens evolved before the brain reached its current globular shape. The cognitive architecture we associate with modern human behavior, the full expansion of the parietal and temporal regions associated with language, social cognition, and abstract thought, came later. The face arrived first. That sequence was not predicted by any existing model of human evolution prior to this discovery. The dating methodology used at Jebel Irhoud combined thermoluminescence dating of heated flint tools found alongside the fossils with direct dating of the fossil material itself. Both methods converged on the same age range. The flint tools recovered from the site are also significant. They are Middle Stone Age implements of considerable sophistication, including carefully prepared blade cores and projectile points, indicating that the individuals at Jebel Irhoud were not behaviorally primitive, despite their archaic cranial morphology. Modern face, ancient skull shape, sophisticated tools, and a timeline that reaches 315,000 years into the past. Everything that was certain about human origins became a working hypothesis again the moment those dates were confirmed. Top 7. Karahantepe. Approximately 35 kilometers southeast of Göbekli Tepe, in the Tek Mountains of southeastern Turkey, a site has been emerging from the ground since systematic excavations began in 2019 that may prove more significant than the discovery that already rewrote prehistoric history. Karahantepe is not a smaller version of Göbekli Tepe. It is not a satellite site or a secondary settlement. It is a distinct complex with its own architectural logic, its own symbolic vocabulary, and its own construction techniques, some of which have no parallel anywhere in the known archaeological record. What is being uncovered at Karahantepe is forcing researchers to confront a possibility that mainstream archaeology has resisted for decades, that the civilization responsible for these structures was not a transitional culture stumbling toward complexity. It was already there. The most immediately striking feature of Karahantepe is the bedrock chamber discovered in 2021. Unlike the circular enclosures at Göbekli Tepe, this chamber was carved directly into the natural limestone bedrock of the hillside. The walls, floor, and ceiling were shaped by human hands to create an enclosed ritual space of deliberate geometric proportions. Emerging from the floor and walls of this chamber are phallic pillars carved in relief and in the round, numbering more than 200, all cut from the same continuous bedrock. The workmanship is precise and consistent, the sheer labor represented by carving that many figures from living rock at a site dated to approximately 11,000 years ago, using only stone tools, is staggering by any engineering estimate applied to it. The T-shaped pillars found at Karahantepe closely resemble those at Göbekli Tepe, but show distinct stylistic evolution. Several pillars bear carvings of animals and human hands in configurations that researchers have not fully interpreted. One pillar features a three-dimensional human head emerging from the stone with a realism that should not be present in Neolithic sculpture. The facial features are individualized rather than generic, suggesting portraiture rather than symbolic representation. If that interpretation holds, it means the people who built Karahantepe were carving recognizable human likenesses into stone 11,000 years ago, a practice previously associated with far later civilization. The site covers a significantly larger area than Göbekli Tepe. Current excavations have exposed only a fraction of the total complex. Ground-penetrating radar surveys suggest that the buried portions extend considerably beyond what has been uncovered. The population required to construct and maintain a site of this scale, and to feed, organize, and coordinate that population, implies a level of social complexity that contradicts the hunter-gatherer model assigned to this period. No evidence of agriculture has been found at the site. No permanent residential structures have been identified. A society without farming and without fixed housing built one of the most labor-intensive stone complexes in human prehistory. The mechanism that made that possible has not been explained. The organizational system that sustained it has not been identified. Karahantepe keeps producing answers that generate larger questions. Top 8. Lomekwi 3. Stone tools on the western shore of Lake Turkana in northern Kenya, in a dry, sun-bleached landscape that preserves the bones and artifacts of deep prehistory with unusual clarity, a team of researchers made a discovery in 2015 that did not merely push back the known date of human toolmaking. It severed the assumed connection between toolmaking and the human genus entirely. The site, designated Lomekwi 3, produced 149 stone artifacts, including cores, flakes, and anvils, that showed deliberate and systematic manufacture. The techniques used were cruder than later stone tool traditions, but unmistakably intentional. These were not rocks broken by geological accident or animal activity. They were shaped by a thinking creature that understood the mechanical properties of stone and applied controlled force to produce a predictable result. The dating of the sedimentary layer containing these tools returned an age of 3.3 million years. That number restructured the entire field of paleoanthropology in a single publication. The reason that date is so destabilizing is straightforward. The genus Homo, the evolutionary line that includes modern humans and our closest extinct relatives, did not exist 3.3 million years ago. The oldest confirmed Homo fossils date to approximately 2.8 million years ago. The Lomacui 3 tools predate the emergence of our own genus by at least 500,000 years. The creature responsible was almost certainly an Australopithecus, a genus previously too cognitively primitive to manufacture stone tools. Australopithecus had a brain roughly 1/3 the size of a modern human brain. The prevailing assumption in paleoanthropology had been that a brain of that size could not conceive of, plan, and execute the multi-step process of producing a stone tool. Lomacui 3 demonstrated that assumption was wrong. The tools themselves belong to a previously unrecognized technological tradition that researchers named Lomaquian, distinct from the previously oldest known tradition called Oldowan, which dated to approximately 2.6 million years ago. The Lomaquian tools are larger and show a different knapping technique using passive hammer strikes against an anvil, rather than the freehand percussion that characterizes Oldowan tools. This is not a cruder version of a later technique. It is a different technique entirely, which suggests an independent development of stone tool technology rather than a linear progression from one tradition to the next. The evolutionary story of tool making was not a single straight line. It was multiple independent experiments by multiple species across millions of years. The implications for the timeline of cognitive evolution are profound and unresolved. If tool making did not originate with Homo, then the cognitive threshold required for technology is lower than the human brain size model predicted. That revision forces a re-examination of every other behavioral marker used to distinguish human ancestors from non-human primates. Planning, foresight, material knowledge, and motor precision were all present in a species with a brain the size of a large orange. The bones of whatever creature sat at Lomacui 3 and struck those stones together have not been found at the site. The toolmaker remains unidentified. Only the tools remain. 3 million years old, sitting in a Kenyan museum, waiting for a theory adequate to explain them. Top 9. Cerruti Mastodon Site. In 1992, during routine highway construction in San Diego, California, a backhoe operator working on an expansion project for State Route 54 struck something unexpected several feet below the surface. Construction was halted. Paleontologists from the San Diego Natural History Museum were called to the site. What they uncovered over the following months was the partial skeleton of a mastodon, an extinct elephant relative that roamed North America during the Pleistocene epoch. The bones were broken in specific, non-random patterns. Large cobblestones were found in direct association with the skeletal material. The arrangement of the bones and stones suggested deliberate activity at the site, consistent with the behavior of a creature using rocks to break open mastodon bones to extract the nutritious marrow inside. The site was carefully documented, the specimens were collected, and then the findings were set aside while the dating work continued. When the results finally came back, the researchers sat with them for years before publishing. The mastodon bones were 137 years old. That date, published in the journal Nature in April 2017 by a team led by paleontologist Stephen Holen, did not just challenge the accepted timeline of human arrival in the Americas. It proposed something so far outside the established framework that the scientific community's initial response was widespread rejection. The Clovis first model placed the first Americans at 13,000 years ago. Even the most aggressive pre-Clovis arguments being debated at the time were pushing the date back to perhaps 20,000 or 25,000 years, consistent with the White Sands footprint evidence. The Cerruti Mastodon site proposed human or human-like activity in California 130,000 years ago, more than 10 times earlier than the accepted model and 5 times earlier than even the most radical competing theories. The evidence presented by the research team was methodologically careful. The bone fracture patterns on the mastodon remains match those produced experimentally when fresh elephant bones are struck with stones, a signature of intentional marrow extraction rather than carnivore activity or geological pressure. Several of the large cobbles showed impact marks consistent with use as hammerstones and anvils. The spatial distribution of the bones and tools was not random. It reflected the pattern seen at confirmed butchering sites. 5 independent laboratories conducted uranium series dating on the bone material and returned consistent results. The researchers did not claim to know who was responsible. They claimed only that the physical evidence was consistent with hominin activity at that date. The identity of the toolmaker remains the central unresolved problem. No human or hominin fossils have been found at the site. At 130,000 years ago, anatomically modern Homo sapiens had not yet left Africa in any migration pattern, currently supported by genetic or fossil evidence. The candidates proposed by various researchers include Denisovans, a now extinct hominin group known primarily from Siberian cave deposits, or yet unidentified population whose physical remains have not survived. The official archaeological establishment remains deeply divided. Some accept the dating while questioning the behavioral interpretation. Others reject both. The mastodon bones in San Diego do not care about the disagreement. They are 130,000 years old regardless of whether the theory surrounding them has been resolved. Top 10 Tiwanaku Liquid Stones. On the southern shore of Lake Titicaca in western Bolivia, the ancient city of Tiwanaku has been studied by archaeologists since the 19th century. Its stone monuments, carved gateways, and massive platform structures have generated decades of scholarship focused on the Tiwanaku civilization that flourished there between approximately 500 and 1000 AD. But within that body of research, a specific and deeply anomalous observation has persisted across multiple independent investigators, resisting every conventional explanation that has been applied to it. Certain stone blocks at Tiwanaku show evidence of having been shaped not by cutting, grinding, or chiseling, but by a process that appears to have involved the stone itself becoming temporarily malleable. The blocks show flowing contours, seamless joints between different stone types, surface textures that transition from rough to smooth without tool marks, and geometric precision in curved forms that stone cutting with any known ancient implement cannot replicate. The phrase used by investigators who have studied this phenomenon most closely is that the stone appears to have been poured. The first serious investigator to document this phenomenon in technical terms was Arthur Posnansky, the same archaeologist who spent decades measuring and analyzing the Tiwanaku complex in the early 20th century. Posnansky noted specific blocks where 2 or more different stone types met at their joint points, with a seamless continuity that suggested the materials had been in a fluid or semi-fluid state when they came together. He lacked the material science framework to pursue this observation systematically, but he recorded it with enough precision that later researchers could locate and re-examine the same blocks. What those later examinations found was consistent with his original observation. The joints between different stone types at Tiwanaku show no gap, no adhesive residue, and no mechanical fastening. They meet as if they were cast together. The geopolymer hypothesis, advanced most prominently by French geochemist Joseph Davidovits, proposes that certain ancient cultures possess knowledge of a process by which natural minerals could be dissolved using organic or chemical reagents into a slurry and then recast in molds, effectively creating synthetic stone that hardened in place. Davidovits applied this hypothesis primarily to Egyptian pyramid blocks, where core sample analysis showed microstructural anomalies inconsistent with naturally quarried limestone. Independent researchers applied the same analytical lens to Tiwanaku. Scanning electron microscopy of certain Tiwanaku stone blocks has revealed microstructural features, including air bubbles, organic inclusions, and mineral distributions that are more consistent with a cast or reagglomerated material than with naturally quarried and shaped stone. These findings have been published in peer-reviewed material science journals and have not been formally refuted. They have been ignored by mainstream archaeology, which does not engage with geopolymer claims as a category. What no mainstream model has addressed is the specific curve geometry present in certain Tiwanaku blocks. Curves in stone require either grinding, which leaves characteristic surface signatures, or casting. The curved surfaces in question show neither grinding signatures nor tool marks of any kind. They are smooth, consistent, and geometrically deliberate. The civilization that built Tiwanaku left no written records describing their construction methodology. The oral traditions of the Aymara people, who inhabit the region today, describe the city as having been built in a single night by giants who carried the stones through the air. Archaeology dismisses that tradition as mythology. But the stone itself has not been explained by anything more satisfying than a legend. If these stories have changed the way you perceive the ancient foundations of our world, please subscribe and like the channel. We are dedicated to excavating the history that has been hidden or ignored for far too long. Let us plant the seeds of a new understanding together. The next archaeological treasure will be revealed very soon. Stay tuned.